YouTube. So I got a lovely request to talk about how I celebrate Lammas. It's very interesting because I know how other people talk about the wheel of the year, and you know, certain Sabbaths work really well for them, other ones are like, you know, I forgot, oh, that one's coming up, and different cycles. And I'm definitely one of those witches that when the darker half of the year comes around, like summer solstice on, I'm a very happy witch. I get way more into jiving around. I do a lot more things. I actually put forth like decorations and really think about it, whereas like some of the other ones, there are a lot of times I'm just like, I'll burn a candle and that's about it. So I figured let's just get a list of all the things that I really love to do during the Lammas time. First things first is I like to re-educate myself about the Sabbath holiday this time of the year and some of the historical context and everything else, especially with my depth year and looking into things. And I've just noticed in general there's a lot of time where I'm like, what was it about the barley man or whatever, like what was that thing about him? What was the story that went along with him, the myth? At what point did people do certain tasks? Like there's a lot of things that happen within all the different holidays and all the different associations, and I can be forgetful. And reminding myself of the history and all the different overviews and all the fun things like that is a lot of fun. A lot of people will pop up during this time, or during each Sabbath time they'll talk about, hey, let's talk about this article, or hey, let's talk about this one particular aspect of it, or this one particular, I don't know, essence of it, or about that culture that specific one comes from, or a lot of the different focuses around the world. People just talk about the Sabbath in general, so I really like to take probably a day or two before I decorate, and I sit down and I go, okay, let's remember all the things about Lammas, or I don't know if Lammas is right, I believe it's the Celtic side of it, is the Lunasad? Pronunciations. One of the things that I love is, for me, that it is known this is the first harvest, the first kind of separation of wheat or corn, and that people would then take, and it was a big celebratory thing back in the day to take that first harvest and share it with your group or your community. And for me, the first sign of harvest means fall. Fall is here, it is coming, it is on its way. We want to help bring fall in, and so that's a lot of what my celebration of it centers around. So after I do a little bit of research, kind of just listen to some music people say is dedicated to this time, listen to the history about it again, kind of just like refresh my memory, I then like to make a very distinct grocery list. Now for me, growing up in the Midwest and just this time of the year, corn is one of my favorite foods, especially there's very specific different types of like sweet corn that you can get in like Illinois, Indiana. I know there's a couple of them that people are like, this is the best. If you're from that area of the United States, let me know, which one do you think is the best corn? There's like people like are diehard about their farms and shit, right? So I like corn a lot, so I will definitely make some sort of corn dish. I make sure to add that to my grocery run. I believe, if I remember correctly, Lammas covers from, is it from the 31st to the 2nd, or the 2nd to the 3rd, or I mean the 1st to the 3rd? I think it's 31st of July to the 2nd of August. It's kind of how that falls. So whatever day of that section of time where if I don't have a bunch of crap going on or work or whatever else, I carve out a nice time. I'm like, no, that's the night I'm gonna have a really nice dinner. And so corn is definitely a thing of it. And also on the day of, I make sure I have all the things that I need to bake my own bread. I specifically like to make garlic knots because for me, the act of tying the dough into a knot is very symbolic. It feels witchy to me. I feel like I can like seal in the goodness of the fall or whatever spell I'm trying to put into the food. So that's one of my favorite things to make. Something involving corn, something involving that. And I believe beer and mead and all those things are like another one of the things people really like right now. So I'll just kind of like go to the grocery store and pick a little something, hopefully locally, a little beverage to make the night a good one. So that's the food portion of it. The corn is more of just like symbolically what I eat, whereas like the bread, I very specifically have a bit of an invoking spell, I guess, for that time. I also, since one of my deities is Persephone, I recognize that Mama's getting antsy. She probably want to go down to where her husband is. In my mind, Persephone can come and go as she pleases and probably does it on the regular, but the marking, I believe from Samhain to Ostara, or some people, like when she descends down is, right? But in my mind, the harvest is also the trigger for Persephone to start her descent. So in a lot of ways, the little mini feast that I have with a celebration of a drink and these types of food is kind of like my farewell feast to her, to say like, happy journeys, down to below you go. Once I've gotten all the food and stuff together and decided what I'm doing, what type of all the things I'll put together I want to do, I will then also break out my more fall-oriented decorations, but not all of them. Very specifically, I kind of bring them out gradually and they get more and more macabre as the closer we get to Samhain. October 1st is just the full spooky in my apartment. That's when that happens. But so right now I've pulled out a little bit of fall garland, specifically my altar. I have an old antique tablecloth that has been handed down through my family, so I have that as becomes my altar cloth during this time. I make sure that there are little scatterings of whatever fall-like things. I used to have like fake fall leaves and fake fall garland and gourds and whatever around my altar because I lived in Arizona and the desert just didn't have a lot of traditional fall things that I signified as fall. Now though, I'm kind of excited for, well, this is my first Lammas here in Portland, so I'm kind of excited. I don't know when the trees start changing and when things start going. My first fall here, I'm so excited. But it is currently very hot, still very summer, probably be very summer for a very little longer bit, very longer bit, words. Having a little of those fake things around, and then I hope to, once it gets a little more into it, probably be close around Mabon and then Samhain, I'll go and forage for a couple of things I can bring in from the outside and onto my altar. Also with my altar, I kind of do a sit down, and normally what would happen for me is I would sit down on my altar and do a kind of invoking manifestation for how my fall should go with a corn doll. So I would go and get the corn that I bought previously. I would take out some of the ears of the corn and dry it out. Some people do wheat dolls, I do a corn doll, and very specifically with my ritual on actual llamas is I make up that doll from my food that I was having earlier. I leave it to dry out the night before so it's nice and then crunchy, you know, not too moist, won't like mold while you're tying it and then leaving it there. If there's any moisture trapped, it's not nice. Dry out your leaves first. So once the leaves are dried out, the night of whatever day I choose to celebrate within that span would normally be a time for me to, I write a letter to myself, a manifestation of kind of like a commitment to the fall or a commitment to, I don't know, sometimes it's like, I just want to manifest this in the next 3 months, or I want to, you know, just focus on something like gratitude or whatever else, what have you. And so I write all of that down within a spell in a little piece of paper that I actually wrap up and tie into my corn dolly. And then that lives on my altar to charge for the entirety of fall, to then be burned and or passed on somehow. I don't know how I'm gonna burn things here. Probably on a pot in my sink or something, because I used to have a little fire pit when I lived with my parents. I don't have that anymore, so. But on Samhain, I then burn the doll to release all of that energy that has been charging up from Lammas to Samhain out into the universe, hopefully for the other half of the witch's year, or for the upcoming witch's year, I guess, right? And then for the rest of my space, I don't know, I just kind of like add little bits of what I consider fall-ish. I consume a lot more, this is the start of my mind of more spicy things. We're talking the ginger and getting into some more curries, a little more of the paprika and the cinnamon. Like it starts dabbling its way in. It's just a slow progression into just pumpkins and all the delicious gourds and butternut squashes and yes, all the things. But the one interesting thing about this Lammas, besides it being my first in Portland, is also the fact that I am doing a currently deity devotion for 3 months. June was Persephone, July is now wrapping up Loki, and for August, right when Lammas is coming around, I am now then going to devote to Sobek for an entire month. And all of my spells, everything in tune with it, is going to go into him. So in a weird way, I feel like the crocodile is going to be guiding a lot of my Lammas based festivities. There are certain, normally I would have a lot more like yellows and golds and oranges, like, you know, the traditional colors of this time of the year in my place in general, but because with Sobek I also recognize a lot of like darker hued greens, sage greens, crocodile, and lots of other water-based things. I'm going to hopefully incorporate that somehow into my environment, I guess. I don't know, because as I'm like pulling out things, I do feel a certain call to move in a certain direction that is a little more Sobek based as opposed to purely Lammas and all that based. So I will be merging the two, probably looking at a little more of the Egyptians myths and seeing if I can find anything that the people of as the Romans then called it, Crocodilopolis, used to possibly do around this time of the year. Is there any associations? If any of you guys know, I think that the people from the like, ancient Egyptian pantheon, if there's anything about them in celebratory of this range or time of the year, comment down below. Maybe I can integrate that a little bit. But anyway, that is my current plans for Lammas. I will put a couple links down below of different people that I just like to re-listen to and hear all about, you know, the different, how they celebrate, or some of the histories and things of this type of holiday, of this holiday. And also then comment down below, what are you guys doing for it? Are you doing anything really special? Lammas to me is always kind of, I don't know, sometimes I guess certain people overlook it as a Sabbath. It's not as big of a deal to them, but for me it was my first ever Sabbath after dedicating myself and following path of witchcraft. So for me it is always kind of like a big deal and I want to take the time to bake the bread and do the things and, you know, just really kind of fall in love with it again. Anyway, I make new videos every single week. Yes, cat. And I will see you guys next time. Bye bye.